Kidoki, good morning, good morning, good morning. Thank God we got football tonight. That's the first thing on my mind. We got Bucks Falcons college football game, so got that going on. Mets and the Brewers play. That's that, and yeah, it's I think my main takeaway is you have to play small ball when you don't have clearly the best players. If you want to play, if the Yankees or the Dodgers or the Phillies with their best players, if they don't want to play small ball, they have the pedigree. That's how they want to build their teams. That's fine. But the Orioles' best players don't have the pedigree to not demand small ball. So by not playing small ball, by not forcing it in the middle of the summer and having a come to Jesus moment that we're not a home run hitting team, that shouldn't be our identity. It all just turned its ugly head in that fifth inning yesterday because we just couldn't get the runs in. So that's the end of that. Royals played small ball and won, and we just didn't, and we only got the one home run, and there's just nobody on base. So I think my main takeaway is not really anger. It's not even really disappointment because I guess we all probably saw the writing on the wall for months now, and it just I wanted to play that Yankee series really bad because I felt like we would win that one on emotion. But hey, we don't get the joy of that series, and it's over with. So they need a new manager, number one, and the rest of the roster, I think, is dependent upon who the new manager is because there has to be a what's the identity, and a lot of tough decisions have to be made. I guess we'll tackle them in a few months, but yeah, I think it's two things can be true. Brandon Hyde did a great job for the time that he was here for what he was asked to do, and it's also time to move on and figure out what should be the identity. In my opinion, the identity needs to be small ball, like the way the Royals play. You got to be a better version of the Royals, which I think we could have been. I think we have better players than them, but if you don't move guys and you're not in the habit of doing that, you don't blame individual players when no one hit the ball, right? Like the whole season, I guess everybody that's why I think it's more about coaching. It's the identity of the team. And once the home runs start flowing early in the career, it's easy to, the launch angles and all these, metrics and things that point towards, hey, you get paid by hitting home runs. And anyway, so that was my takeaway is the fifth inning just unfolded and tough break, tough break. Betting wise, just a disaster, another disaster. It's like if the Tigers are going to come back and score, maybe get one more run, but no. And the Astros are just dead. Man, they were dead. They looked lifeless the entire time, just lifeless. And oh boy, so baseball is over with in my head. That's for sure. Man, I will. I don't know. I really don't know because I just want to bet against the Yankees. That doesn't seem like a sound gambling strategy. I don't think I've watched the Guardians play baseball besides when they play the Orioles. So I don't know. I was gonna stay away from that series regardless. And yeah, Padres seem like they're hot. They're ready to go. I don't know. Who knows? Who knows? I don't even feel like thinking about baseball right this second. I took a break from baseball. I feel like terrible for the people that cover baseball nonstop. They didn't even have a break. Then they get themselves excited for the last week of the season. And yeah, crowd was terrible. Just a lot of bad vibes, a lot of bad juju for a team that shouldn't have had it. Like it all went away really fast. So I think there needs to be just a realization about how young we are, and we kind of I'm not start from scratch, but yeah, get back to just moving guys over, get a run, play with a lead, not try to win 10-0. So all right, that's that for the Orioles. I'll talk about them in a few weeks, but I'm sure if you want to, I was guilty of it yesterday, consuming a lot of Orioles content. There's plenty of great people to listen to, plenty of ridiculous takes. I think the most ridiculous takes are blaming Elias or giving up on our best players. Should have drafted Bobby Witt instead of Adley. Those are the people that don't really understand baseball. That's a results based analysis. Like if you go back in real time, there wasn't a debate on who to take. You always take the catcher. And then you say, oh, well, the catcher gets hurt and this, that, and the third. You take the catcher. You just do. And Adley's been great. And he wasn't great the last few months of the season. So why? I don't know. It's hard to figure out when it's not, when a lot of baseball is mental. So you can guess, you can try to go on their social media and think about what the hell's going on in their lives. But I look at it like they're just all really, really young, and it's unpredictable when your brains, haven't fully developed. They're 22, 23, 24, not married, not have kids. I said it yesterday. It's just hard to predict behavior. And then when things start spiraling out of control, there's got to be a leader. And Hyde, I think, failed this year by saying, hey, we got to stop trying to hit home runs and force guys to bunt the ball and just force things that implement a new identity. They didn't do it. It's over. Bucks Falcons. Let's do that for a couple minutes, and then I'll be back in here tomorrow to start fresh with football and stop sounding so sad because it is sports and it shouldn't be that big of a deal. So let's just move on. All right. So first of all, before I do Bucks Falcons, if you want the best analysis, like to listen to after about a month or so of football, just consuming all kinds of content, John Gruden's got a YouTube channel. I don't know exactly what his plan is, come back in coaching, but he's doing a great job. You don't have to like him, but man, he covers every game for like 30 to 40 minutes. And it's just great. It's so much information. So for this Bucks Falcons game in particular, I really enjoyed his analysis because he used to coach for Tampa and he broke down the coaching, the connections with the coaches, and all kinds of different things. So John Gruden breaking down the games, good listen. So, all right, my thoughts on Bucks Falcons. First of all, spreads 1.5. Falcons favored by 1.5. Basically a pick'em game. Hard to figure out the Falcons right this second because they're up and down. Could be 4-0, could be 0-4. So they're right where they're supposed to be there, 2-2. They're on the field a lot last week. The Saints ran a lot more plays, and vice versa. The Tampa, same thing. Tampa's offense was on the field a ton last week. So the Falcons defense is going to be a little tired. They get the benefit of being at home. It really does feel like a 50-50 game. Last year was kind of weird because the Bucks won in Atlanta, but Atlanta won in Tampa. The game in Atlanta was more of an offensive game, where the game in Tampa was more of a defensive game. The more I look at Tampa last week, I say, man, they're just, if they play with the lead, that defense is ferocious. They're just super hard to prepare for, especially on a Thursday night. Tampa Bay's defense just befuddled, whatchamacallit, Jalen Hurts and the Eagles all day. So I lean towards the under. The only thing that gives me pause is that the Bucks defense actually doesn't match up well with the Falcons. The Bucks defense took advantage of the fact that the receivers were out for the Eagles last week. Falcons, whether or not they're going to be able to block is the question, because if they can give Cousins time, the Bucks secondary is vulnerable, especially with Winfield being out. That's the weak spot for Tampa. So if Tampa gets the lead, they do the exotic blitzes. They don't really even blitz that much. It'll be more of like a show blitz, and then they drop into coverage. But they won't have Kancey, who is their best pass rusher. So I love the matchup for Tampa last week. I don't love it this week at all. But on the flip side, the Falcons offense, it's hard to figure out what their identity is. Talk about the Orioles' identity a minute ago. Like, what is the Falcons' identity? Because they just want to roll it out here and just let Cousins cook, or do they want to run the ball the way they did against the Eagles? Last week, they're not on the field very much, so not a lot of running. This week, they will try to run the ball because you cannot start the game and just drop back. And Tampa's defense, it's too much. It's a lot going on. I don't know. I don't have a ton of faith in the Falcons' offense. So I do lean towards the under, but for some reason, it almost feels like a little too easy. And then last year, the Bucks offense played well there. Like I said, the Falcons could hit a couple of deep balls. So it's only 6:30 in the morning, so I'll think about it as the day goes on. But it's not going to be a strong play for me, one way or the other. It's just I had a good feeling about Bucks last week. This week, division matchup, they're on the road. I'm not 1,000% sure on it. So most likely we'll either stay away or just find a prop or two that I like. And yeah, next, tomorrow I'm going to go through all the NFL games, but just one game I wanted to highlight, or actually, well, there's a couple games I really wanted to highlight, but in particular, when you're talking about like line movement and trying to get ahead of things and making sure, that if you're going to bet a team, you so there's let me start for a second. So if you need to wait for every piece of information, whether it's weather, some injuries, whatever is going on, that's usually my style, like for 80 to 90% of my bets. So I won't actually make them until the inactives come out. But like Tampa Bay last week, there will be a handful of bets that you like during the week, meaning if something changes, it's not really going to affect it. And more importantly, you want to get the best odds possible. So the Bears is something I saw today where it's already jumped to 4 in some places, but it's still 3.5 in other places. So like the Panthers Bears matchup is a typical, not analyzing the game, but just from a gambling perspective. If you like the Bears, bet it as quickly as you can early in the week. Right now, if you like the Bears, bet them because there's a good chance it goes up to 4.5 or 5 instead of it going down. When you think about why a line's going to move, you simply try to get into the minds of the average, not the average, but just people that bet, right? People that bet for a living. What teams do people typically like to bet on? Do they not like to bet on? And you look at certain matchups and you're like, I think the odds makers underestimated certain things there. And the Panthers not covering last week and the Bears covering. It's hard to want to bet on the Panthers anyway. And so they made that initial line, and it they made the initial line at 5.5, right? So they overcompensated for how many people they thought would just that's kind of what my thought would be. You make that line 5.5, 5. I'm inclined to take the Bears there. It's hard to want to bet the Panthers, but instead, a lot of money came in on Carolina, knocked it all the way down to 3.5. And typically, when you see something like that, people want to jump to a conclusion about why it's happening, who's betting on it, and I stay away from all that. Like I've said this plenty of times. That's just a waste of energy. What you really want to do is say, okay, there was a overcorrection, but excuse me, there was a correction to the line. Like the Bears shouldn't have been 5.5, but should have really just gone all the way down to 3.5. And then that's where you find it at 4. So that was one game that popped up at me. Same thing with the Ravens Bengals, like, but in the reverse way. I expect more money to come on Cincinnati as we get closer to the game. So the line started off where the Ravens are at 2.5. It's still 2.5. If you like the Ravens, I wait. I don't see that going up to 3. I look at now that's just my gut feeling. I don't necessarily have the science behind that, but when I look at the overreaction to, all right, the Ravens played the Bills, they dominated them. So if the line was going to move, it would have already moved. As the week goes on, the more analysis you look at that, it's like, all right, maybe that was just a bad spot for Buffalo. Cincinnati's at home. They have to win now. And I could see more money coming in on Cincinnati being a home dog. It's a lot of things that people like to bet on. Home dog, Joe Burrow, the whole 9 yards. So I would be, what are the Ravens? I'm looking at -140, -145 on the money line. I could see that coming down to -130. So those are just like two things. More so the Bears one jumped out at me because it was a huge line movement to begin with. And I wouldn't have known that it was going to be corrected. So when it started off at 5.5, it really surprised me when it went all the way down to 3.5. But once it went down to 3.5, I could see that being an overreaction. So anyway, that's that. I'm going to break down all the NFL games tomorrow so I can give my thoughts on it, find some value. Not a lot of games jumped out at me when I first looked at it. So we'll see if that changes as I go through it. And yeah, sorry for I guess everybody's a little dejected today, but starting tomorrow morning, going to get back on the positive train because I don't know. At the end of the day, I'm frustrated with the Orioles, but I think my last thought on it is I'm glad to be a fan of, a Mike Elias led team because I don't blame him for what happened at the trade deadline. I think he built a team of really good quality players that are easy to root for who are just not quite ready to win yet. They're young and they just weren't quite ready to win. I don't know what other trades he could have made that would have put things over the top because the pitchers you point to, that ended up not being the case. Like the pitching staff held up. So was there a random Aaron Judge available? I don't think so. So you can start guessing who was available, but I don't think anybody anticipated that they would just kind of run out of gas. I think that was Burns's quote, and that's what happened. They ran out of gas. They need a new manager, and it's not that big of a deal, really. Like have a new manager next year, a little bit of new energy, 2 or 3 new players. identify the roles a little bit better so we're not feeling like it's spring training in the middle of May and June and we're trying to figure out who's starting here and starting there. So, yeah. And yeah, not angry though. Not angry. And it's just over with. So tomorrow we'll talk football and get ready for the weekend. Hope everybody has a great day. And yeah, that's that. So see you guys in the morning.